In the early hours of August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley, the king of rock, delivered what many consider to be one of the most emotional performances of his life. But what happened that night, in the privacy of his own home, would mark the final chapter of a legendary career and a silent goodbye. Hours before his death, Elvis sat at the piano and delivered a performance that deeply touched even the hardest hearts. But what exactly did he sing? What were the last songs the king performed, and how did they reflect the emotional state of one of the greatest icons in music history? Graceland, the iconic mansion located in Memphis, Tennessee, is not only the home where Elvis Presley spent much of his life, but it also became the stage for his final performance, one of the most intimate and symbolic moments in his history. The residence, purchased by Elvis in 1957, was where he built his life away from the spotlight. Graceland was a reflection of his complex, multifaceted personality, a fusion of luxury and reclusiveness, grandeur and vulnerability. When Elvis acquired Graceland, he was seeking a refuge from the hectic world of fame. The mansion, with its majestic facade and opulent interior, became his private fortress, away from cameras and public attention. It was here that Elvis welcomed friends, family, and even some celebrities, but also where he isolated himself, retreating into the privacy of his home, which, in many ways, represented his quest for normalcy. Life at Graceland was not just about ostentation. Although the place was filled with luxury, velvet walls, ornate furniture, and refined decorative accessories, the atmosphere of Graceland also reflected the growing solitude that overtook Elvis in the last decades of his life. In the early hours of August 16, 1977, just months shy of turning 43, Elvis was at his home, far from the grand stages and his tireless fans. But this would be the night of one of the most emblematic goodbyes the music world had ever witnessed. That early morning, in particular, began like any other night at Graceland, marked by a simple and laid-back gathering between Elvis and a few close friends. The house was quiet, without the presence of journalists or the general public. Graceland, once again, became a space for privacy and reflection, away from the flashes of fame. And it was in this setting that Elvis, as a final form of expression, decided to sit at the piano. What makes this moment so significant is the fact that Graceland, beyond being a home, also symbolized the emotional tension that Elvis experienced in the last years of his life. He was far from the major tours that had been part of his life for decades, and his physical and mental health were in decline. The luxury and comfort of his residence could not mask the wear and tear on a man who, despite being powerful and beloved, was struggling with his own internal battles. Elvis was fighting addictions, depression, and growing isolation, reflecting the disconnect between the image he projected to the world and what he truly felt inside. By choosing Graceland as his stage for the last performance, Elvis wasn't just seeking solace in the familiarity of the place that had welcomed him for so many years, but he was also creating a space where he could privately express, without external pressures, his deepest emotions. This performance was not for a crowd of fans, but for a select group of friends with whom he felt a genuine connection. The fact that he chose this moment to sit at the piano and sing reflects a desire to share his most intimate feelings without the need for applause or recognition. The atmosphere at Graceland that night was one of absolute privacy and silence, interrupted only by the soft sound of Elvis's piano and the songs he chose to play. In his residence, Elvis could be more than just the king of rock. He could be just Elvis, the man, dealing with the realities of his life and the uncertainties of his future. Choosing Graceland for this final act of artistic expression made the mansion even more symbolic in his journey. The place where he sought refuge now became the stage for the end of his journey. When Elvis sat at that piano in the early hours, he didn't know those would be his final hours. But the songs he chose to play that night, like Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, show the depth of his reflection on what was to come. Graceland, with its grandeur and shadows, was the last place he could hide from the world and still remain vulnerable. The very act of singing for close friends, without the weight of fame, was an expression of who he really was. A man who, despite his flaws and internal struggles, never stopped connecting with what music meant to him. Thus, Elvis's final performance at the piano in Graceland was not just a moment of farewell, but also a revelation of the complexity of a man who was always more than the image projected by stardom. The house he chose as his final refuge now became part of the legacy that would continue to echo, not only as a place of fame and fortune, but also as the place where the man, Elvis Presley, said his final goodbye to the world. Elvis Presley was not just the king of rock, but also an artist whose songs reflected his own emotional complexity. The last two songs he sang in the early hours of August 16, 1977 at Graceland, Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain and Unchained Melody, were deeply emotional choices, reflecting Elvis's internal struggle, his losses, and his attempt to find himself amid the chaos that dominated his life. These songs were not just performances, they were farewell messages and introspections, artistic choices that captured the essence of a man about to leave the stage of life. Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain is a song written by Fred Rose and released by Willie Nelson in 1975. Though it was a country ballad, the song became one of Elvis's favorites in the last years of his life. The soft melody and the lyrics about melancholy and longing touched something deeply personal in Elvis. In many of his live performances, he showed an intimate connection with the song, but it was in his final performance, in the privacy of Graceland, that he truly brought it to life. The song speaks about the loss of love and the longing that remains, a universal theme that crosses the barriers of time and musical genre. By performing it, Elvis wasn't just singing about romantic separation, he was singing about something deeper. In some way, he was talking about the loneliness and personal struggles he was facing at that period of his life. By sitting at the piano and singing Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain in that intimate context, Elvis seemed to be bidding farewell to his public image and revealing a side of himself that was not always accessible to his fans. The song reflected the nostalgia for better times and the lament of a man who, despite all his success, felt vulnerable and disconnected from his own happiness. Unchained Melody, on the other hand, was a song that Elvis frequently performed in the last years of his career. Originally written by Alex North and Hy Zarrett for the 1955 film Unchained, the song quickly became a timeless classic, reinterpreted by numerous artists over the decades. Elvis's version, recorded in 1977, is considered one of the most emotional and moving of his career. When Elvis sang it, he wasn't just performing a song, but in some way, he was offering a part of his soul to the audience. The lyrics of Unchained Melody, which speak of the search for freedom and the reunion with a loved one, also resonated with Elvis's own battles, his fight for personal freedom, his search for inner peace, and the hope of finding redemption. Elvis's interpretation of this song, especially in his last shows, was marked by palpable emotional intensity. His voice, already marked by physical wear from substance abuse and the exhaustion of relentless touring, still managed to convey a depth that touched the hearts of the audience. When he sang Unchained Melody, there was a sense of total surrender, an attempt to convey his innermost feelings through music. That song became for him a vehicle for personal expression, an emotional outpouring that went beyond the stage performance. Even without the vibrant energy of his earlier years, Elvis was still able to deliver one of the most moving interpretations of his career, capturing the essence of pain and the desire to break free. The emotional impact of both songs cannot be overstated. Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain and Unchained Melody were not just repertoire choices. They were artistic declarations from a man who knew he was saying goodbye, even though he hadn't received a clear warning. These songs reveal the duality of Elvis, the man who spent his life being worshipped, but who, in the end, was struggling to find peace with himself. In Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, Elvis seemed to acknowledge the transience of life and relationships, while in Unchained Melody, he was searching for something deeper, perhaps even meaning for his personal struggles. These songs, besides being part of his musical legacy, also have historical importance, as they give us a glimpse of who Elvis was behind the public image. They reveal his vulnerabilities, his yearnings, and his search for something more than fame and recognition. In the final days of his life, Elvis was no longer the tireless star dominating the stage, but a man trying to find solace in music, the one thing that seemed to have been constant in his life. Therefore, when we analyze Elvis's last songs, we are not just studying the end of a musical career, but also understanding the man behind the myth. The choices of Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain and Unchained Melody are, in a way, a direct message from Elvis himself to those who loved him and to the world. Music for him was always a way to express himself more authentically, and his last performance was an opportunity to let the world hear his truth, even if that meant exposing himself in his most vulnerable forms. Elvis Presley is undoubtedly one of the most influential figures in music history. His career shaped the landscape of rock and roll and left a legacy that endures to this day. However, when analyzing his final performance, which took place in a private setting at Graceland, it becomes clear that the impact of Elvis goes beyond fame and public adoration. He is, indeed, a symbol of the internal struggle between public greatness and personal battles. Elvis's last performance on August 16, 1977, offers a deep insight not only into his music, but also into the man behind the icon. The songs Elvis chose for his last performance, Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain and Unchained Melody, were not just songs he liked to sing, but choices that resonated deeply with him in his last days. The first one, with its melancholy and lyricism about loss, almost seems prophetic, reflecting Elvis's own feelings about the decline of his health and the emotional loneliness he was living. Unchained Melody, on the other hand, carried an intense and complex emotional weight, representing not only Elvis's personal struggle for freedom, but also his search for redemption. These two songs capture a vulnerable Elvis, more than the powerful artist the public knew on stage. In his final performance, what the world saw was not just the showman, but a man dealing with his own flaws, fears, and uncertainties. Elvis's greatness as an artist was always evident. He was not just a singer, he was a cultural phenomenon, a figure who defined generations and influenced countless artists who followed him. However, his final performance at Graceland shows us that, behind the public figure and the king of rock, there was a man with complex feelings and a sensitivity that was not visible in the vibrant and grand performances he gave to fans. In his final days, Elvis was on a much more personal journey. His struggle with addictions, his deteriorating health, and the emotional challenges he faced were hidden beneath the weight of fame. But in this intimate moment, with the choice of songs, he seemed to want to show the world his vulnerability. This moment at Graceland was also a symbolic farewell. Choosing a private space for this final performance, a place he always considered his refuge, demonstrates the difference between the Elvis on stage and the Elvis in everyday life. By performing away from the spotlight, he was no longer seeking the applause of the public, but a genuine connection with those around him, in an environment that gave him a modicum of control over his own life. Choosing to sing at Graceland, in a moment of deep introspection and reflection, was Elvis's way of saying goodbye to the world as he really was, without the external pressures of fame, but with the same passion for music that always defined him. The legacy of Elvis's last performance is therefore multifaceted. It is not just a story of a man who left too soon, but also a story of an artist who, even in his final moments, continued to express himself through music. The songs he chose to sing that day were not just performances, they were messages. They revealed a humanity that was often hidden beneath the grandeur of his career. Elvis was saying goodbye, and his farewell songs were not just about death, but about the search for an inner peace that he never seemed to completely find while he was alive. The impact of his death and his last performance was immediate and profound. On August 16, 1977, the world lost an icon. But Elvis's songs, particularly the ones he sang in the last hours of his life, continued to speak to millions. His songs and style forever influenced popular music, but his legacy also resides in what he represented to the fans who saw him as more than a star. He was a reflection of their own struggles and dreams. Elvis became, after his death, not only an icon of music, but a sort of modern myth. His image was idealized, and his life was filled with rumors and myths, but his last performance at Graceland reminds us of his humanity. Even in his final moments, Elvis wasn't simply trying to say goodbye. He was trying to find some form of resolution. He didn't want to be remembered only as the man who made rock and roll popular, but as the man who, through music, expressed his pain, his searches, and his hopes. The impact of this last performance is also reflected in his relationship with fans. Even after his death, many still see Elvis as an untouchable and distant figure. But this last performance at Graceland humanizes the legend. It reminds us that no matter how much he was the king, Elvis Presley was a man with his own flaws, emotions, and search for meaning in a world that often overwhelmed him. The fact that he chose such a simple performance in such a personal environment is a statement of who he was, someone who, above all, wanted to be heard in a true and authentic way. Ultimately, the legacy of Elvis's last performance is not just about the music, but about the man behind it. Elvis Presley, leaving the stage of life, left us a fundamental lesson. Behind all the greatness, there is a human being with his own battles. And true greatness lies in the ability to continue expressing oneself, even when the battle seems lost. The king may have left, but the man, with his struggles and his music, will continue to live in all of us. This was the story of Elvis Presley's last performance, the intimate moment that revealed the man behind the legend, the emotions that touched his music, and the legacy he left for the world. A story of reflection, vulnerability, and above all, of an artist who, even in his final days, continued to move us with his immortal music. If you were moved by this journey and want to know more about the behind the scenes of music, the lives of great icons, and the stories that shaped our culture, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos. Like this content and share it with your friends who are also fans of Elvis's story and music that transcends time. Elvis Presley's legacy will never disappear, and here on our channel, we will continue to celebrate these unique moments. So stay tuned because the best is yet to come. Until the next video, and as always, keep listening to good music because it never leaves us. The idea that Elvis became involved with Ava Gardner emerged amidst the Hollywood high society circles. During the 1950s and 1960s, Elvis and Ava were frequently mentioned together in celebrity circles. Although there is no concrete proof of a romance, many believe that the singer and the actress had an affair, or at the very least, a significant flirtation. The speculation about the romance between Elvis and Ava started to gain strength due to their proximity, as they met at various parties and events. The media at the time was always keeping an eye on celebrity relationships, and rumors began to circulate that, after her marriage to Sinatra ended, Ava had become more intimate with Elvis. To many, the fact that Ava and Elvis shared a love for public life and the world of music made them a potentially compatible pair, even though their personalities and styles were very different. Some reports indicate that the two met during events in Los Angeles, where Elvis's magnetism and Ava's beauty stood out. There are also mentions of private gatherings and relaxed moments where they seemed to exchange glances and smiles in a way that suggested more than just friendship. Additionally, reports from close friends of Ava and Elvis indicate that both were aware of the tensions between Sinatra and Presley, but this did not prevent them from continuing their interactions. The actress and the singer were, in a way, united by the power of the entertainment world, both highly famous and aware of the public image they projected. But was this friendship really something more? The speculation about a possible romantic involvement is reinforced by a series of anecdotes and observations from those close to both.